From crying and screaming in the courtroom to being unfazed by the verdict, no matter how they reacted, these unalivers were set to face a lifetime in lockup regardless. Their crimes shocked the nation, which is probably why the legal system worked to keep them as far away from the public for as long as possible. Number 12. Chris Watts. A case that shook the nation to its core. In 2018, Chris Watts appeared on television, pleading for his wife and daughter's safe return. Just a day or so earlier, Chris had called 911, claiming that Shannon Watts and daughters Bella and Celeste had been missing. In front of the camera, he appeared to be a distressed family man who just had his world destroyed, but investigators soon discovered that this was all an act. In reality, Chris knew exactly where his family was, disposed of at an oil site where he worked. He had unalived his entire family because they were standing in the way of his affair and the new life he wanted to start with his affair partner. Friends and family claimed that despite some tension in recent times, the couple had no problems whatsoever. They chalked up their recent disputes to stress over the new baby because at the time of the unaliving, Shannon was pregnant with the couple's third daughter. Allegedly, in August 2018, Shannon had confronted her husband over the affair. Words were exchanged, and the confrontation became physical. That was when, in a fit of rage, Chris strangled his pregnant wife. He then went inside his daughter's rooms and unalived them too. After investigators connected him to the crime, he tried to claim that Shannon was the one who had unalived their daughters. He claimed he had panicked and disposed of their bodies to hide his wife's crime. The affair and financial difficulties soon came to light, and Chris had no choice but to confess. In court, Shannon's father read out a heartfelt testimony, addressing Chris, stating that he was meant to protect them, and instead, he did the worst thing imaginable. Chris remained emotionless throughout the hearing, only crying when prosecutors showed the gruesome images of his children's remains. The judge was just as horrified by Chris's crimes as anyone else. In the end, Chris Watts was sentenced to 5 life sentences and will never be able to see the light of day again. Number 11. Nikolas Cruz. Nikolas Cruz carried out one of the most violent school shootings in United States history on February 14, 2018, at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, better known as the Parkland shooting. Armed with a semi-automatic, the 19-year-old former student entered the school and opened fire on students and staff, unaliving 17 people, 14 students and 3 teachers, and injuring many others. He had previously been expelled from the school for behavioral issues and had a history of disturbing online posts and violent threats. Investigators later revealed that Nikolas had planned the attack for months. He researched mass shootings, purchased all weapons legally, and chose Valentine's Day for the attack. Prosecutors argued that his motivations stemmed from a mixture of anger, isolation, and the need to be remembered. Nikolas had experienced a troubled childhood, including the passing of his adoptive parents, and struggled with mental health issues. Nikolas sat with his head down as families of the victims delivered emotional impact statements. The prosecution maintained that he fully understood his actions and deliberately carried out the attack. The case drew global media attention and sparked debates about gun control and school safety. In October 2018, Nikolas pleaded guilty to all 17 counts of unaliving and numerous counts of attempted unaliving. His legal team tried to use his mental health and background in an effort to avoid the capital penalty. After a lengthy trial in 2022, the judge sentenced Nikolas to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When the life sentences were formally announced, he did not react at all and was quietly led away to begin his life in prison. Number 10. Alex Murdaugh. Everyone in South Carolina knows the Murdaugh family, a group of powerful attorneys known in the state for being both rich and problematic. Alex Murdaugh's son, Paul, for example, was set to face trial over the accidental unaliving of a passenger on his speedboat while he was intoxicated. But before Paul could stand trial, his father unalived him along with Maggie Murdaugh. But why? In 2021, Alex called the police in a panic, alleging that he had arrived at the family's lodge and found his wife and son unalived by the dog kennels. Body cam footage shows Alex distraught and in emotional distress. He claimed he was with his mother at the time, who suffered from dementia. However, investigators were soon able to pinpoint Alex's location at the kennels at the time of the unaliving. They arrested him immediately, and the trial, dubbed as the trial of the century by the media, began not too long after. Alex maintained his innocence, shifting the blame between his son and his wife. He claimed they had unalived one another, and he was just the unlucky husband/father who found them there. However, the prosecution shut down the narrative pretty soon when they revealed a text message exchange between Maggie and a friend where she claimed that her husband had been acting fishy when he asked her to come by the lodge. Later, prosecution also revealed that Alex was stealing from his legal clients and was heavily addicted to substances, on the verge of bankruptcy, and distressed over Paul's trial. They claimed that Alex took the easy way out and unalived his family. While he maintained his innocence throughout the trial, crying during the prosecution's remarks and victim testimonies, the judge saw right through it. Alex was sentenced to serve out 2 life terms for both unalivings. Now, since the verdict in 2022, Alex has tried several times to file a dismissal, claiming that the legal clerk mishandled crucial evidence, but the appeals court has dismissed his motions. To this day, Alex Murdaugh claims he was framed. Number 9. Jodi Arias. Travis Alexander's friends and family members tried to warn him about Jodi Arias. They claimed she was unstable and prone to violent outbursts. All in all, the two of them had an extremely volatile and toxic relationship, but it took Travis a long time to actually break up with Jodi, and when he did, she unalived him. This case takes us back to 2008, where, in Mesa, Arizona, Travis's roommates returned to find him bleeding out in the shower with multiple stab wounds. It seemed like whoever had unalived him hated him. Investigators immediately traced Jodi Arias as a suspect, but she claimed that she was in California at the time of the unaliving. Her colleagues later testified that she had arrived at work in a panic that day, but soon went back to normal, claiming she just had a rough start. The truth was that after spending the night at Travis's home, Jodi flew in a jealous rage when she learned that he wanted to end things with her and was also talking to another woman already. Once faced with evidence tying her to the scene of the crime, Jodi changed her entire story. In fact, throughout the lengthy trial, Jodi changed her defense several times. She claimed that Travis was a horrible boyfriend who had allegedly hurt her over the course of their relationship. She also claimed self-defense on the night of the attack, stating that Travis had lunged at her and she was only trying to protect herself. Prosecution had ample evidence tying Jodi to the crime, and they even referred to Jodi's sly smirks during the hearing as proof that she was no survivor, as she claimed. The prosecution also claimed that Jodi was proud of what she had done and thoroughly believed she could get away with it. The case was long because Jodi was constantly changing her defense and her legal team was wearing out the court system for as long as they could. But in 2013, the jury reached a guilty verdict, and the judge sentenced Jodi Arias to life behind bars. Number 8. Lori Vallow Daybell. Lori Vallow was head over heels in love with Chad Daybell, the author of an apocalyptic series. But Chad's work was not a work of fiction. He thoroughly believed that the world was ending and that he was a prophet who could guide his followers through the end. Lori fed into his beliefs, and Chad announced that the two were meant to be, claiming that they had been married in several previous lifetimes. But the problem was that they were both married to other people when they met in 2015. Lori was married to Charles Vallow, and together they cared for 2 children, Tyee, Lori's daughter from a previous marriage, and JJ, Charles's grandson with special needs that the couple had adopted. Chad was also married to Tammy, and the couple shared 5 children. While Tammy shared in Chad's delusions, Charles was against Lori's beliefs. Chad's following grew day by day, and soon the LDS Church publicly distanced itself from him and his cult-like following. Alex Cox, Lori's brother, was also a part of this cult. Police first started looking into the couple's activities when JJ and Tyee were first reported missing. What they did not know was that the children had already been unalived, likely by Alex. They started looking into Charles's unaliving as well, which at the time, Alex had claimed was carried out in self-defense. They also looked into Tammy's passing, exhuming her body, and revealing that she had been strangled. When investigators went over to the couple's home in Idaho, they found out that they had already been married just 2 weeks after Tammy was buried. A day after investigators had visited their residence, Lori and Chad packed up and moved to Hawaii. Alex Cox passed away from natural causes before police could interview him. This meant that the only 2 people who knew the truth were Lori and Chad, the last 2 people who would ever cooperate with the police. It took investigators many months to build a case against them, and it was not until 2019 that Lori and Chad were arrested. That was when, using GPS data retrieved from Alex's phone, they were able to find where Tyee and JJ were buried. The trial gained significant media attention, mostly because of the couple's bizarre beliefs and the lengths they went to. Lori decided to act as her own attorney in court, and her antics ironically helped the prosecution prove that she was an unstable woman who was capable of unaliving her whole family. Chad's trial went along separately, and he all but confessed to carrying out the doomsday plan. Lori claimed that she had unalived her whole family, and even attempted to unalive her niece's husband, Brandon Bordeaux, because they had turned into zombies. Brandon testified, having survived the attempt made on his life, that Lori was actually after his insurance money. Prosecution also showed that the couple had used Tammy's life insurance money to move to Hawaii and start a new life. The judge and jury had heard enough, and in 2023, Lori was sentenced to serve out a life term without the possibility of parole. Number 7. Daryl Brooks. 39-year-old Daryl Brooks had an extensive criminal record that went all the way back to 1999, when he was only 17 years old. In fact, at the time of the 2021 Christmas parade attack, Daryl was once again on the run from the police following a distress call made by his partner. She claimed they had gotten into a domestic dispute and he had attacked her. Daryl made a run for it in his red SUV before police arrived. He tried to claim that because of the immense stress that he was under, along with his diagnosis of BPD, he was not in control of his actions at the Christmas parade. However, the prosecution played videos taken from the event that showed Daryl deliberately running his vehicle into the crowd. The Waukesha Christmas parade had been cancelled in 2020 because of the pandemic, which made the 2021 celebration massive. In the video, a police officer can be seen banging on Daryl's windshield, trying to get him to stop from ramming into the crowd. To show that the attack was deliberate, the prosecution also noted Daryl's zigzag driving pattern. The case was open and shut. Daryl wanted to unalive as many people as he possibly could before being caught. A total of 5 people passed away from injuries sustained at the event. 4 women from the Dancing Grannies troupe and 1 8-year-old boy. Daryl represented himself in court, and it was a spectacle from start to finish. He claimed that he could not be prosecuted under the sovereign citizen movement, and was as disruptive as humanly possible during the prosecution's remarks, the victims' testimonies, and impact statements. The case had to be deferred several times because of his antics. Despite his attempts at prolonging the case, the jury was through with it. In 2022, they reached a guilty verdict and sentenced him to life behind bars. Number 6. James Holmes. James Holmes carried out one of the most infamous attacks in United States history on July 20th, 2012, in Aurora, Colorado. During a midnight premiere of a Batman film, James walked into a packed theater wearing tactical gear and began firing into the crowd. 12 people lost their lives and dozens more were injured. He was arrested shortly after, outside the theater, without putting up a fight. Investigators later discovered that James had spent months planning the attack. He legally bought firearms, ammunition, and protective gear, and even rigged his apartment with explosives. Prosecutors said the act was carefully thought out and meant to cause maximum fear and chaos. Before the attack, James had been a neuroscience graduate student but dropped out. His defense team later argued that he struggled with severe mental health problems and was not fully aware of reality when the attack happened. The trial lasted several years and drew massive media attention. Prosecutors presented detailed evidence showing how James planned everything. His defense focused on his mental state, claiming he was legally insane at the time. James showed almost no emotion. He sat quietly as survivors and victims' families spoke about how their lives were changed forever. However, in 2015, the jury rejected that argument and found him guilty on multiple counts related to the attack. When the judge officially announced the life sentences, James did not flinch. He knew this was coming. Number 5. Scott Peterson. To this day, Scott Peterson will tell anyone who listens that he is innocent. Back in 2002, his 8-month pregnant wife, Lacey Peterson, went missing, and suspicion immediately fell on him. Why? Because it eventually came to light that he was a serial cheater and had even told his most recent girlfriend that he was a widower. This was 2 weeks before Lacey was reported missing. However, according to Scott, he returned that day to find Lacey's car in the driveway, her keys, wallet, and cell phone intact, but Lacey herself missing. He told investigators that he had gone to play golf that day, and the last he remembered was Lacey watching Martha Stewart in the living room. After his televised appeal, his girlfriend, Amber Frey, came forward and told investigators everything she knew. This was when Lacey's family held a press conference, claiming that they now believed Scott had unalived their daughter. But it was not until many months later that their worst fears came true. The fetus and Lassie's torso were found along the shoreline. With only circumstantial evidence, the case against Scott Peterson went forward, and the prosecution claimed that there was more evidence than not to suggest that he had unalived his wife and unborn son. Scott tried maintaining his innocence, crying in court as they showed images of Lassie's decomposed body and their unborn son's lifeless body. He claimed he was innocent, but the jury went ahead with sentencing him to capital punishment. It was not until a few years later that a judge overturned the earlier conviction and ruled that Scott, while deplorable for his crimes, deserved a life in prison instead. Number 4. Susan Smith. Susan Smith shocked the nation in October 1994 after reporting that her car had been stolen with her 2 young sons inside. For more than a week, Susan appeared on television pleading for their safe return, asking the public to help bring them home. The story gained nationwide sympathy, but investigators soon began to notice inconsistencies in her account. After days of questioning, Susan confessed that she had driven her car to a lake in South Carolina and allowed it to roll into the water with her children strapped inside their car seats. Both boys lost their lives. Susan had publicly portrayed herself as a grieving mother. Prosecutors later argued that her motive centered on a romantic relationship with someone who had ended the affair. The man reportedly did not want children, and investigators believed she saw her sons as obstacles to that relationship and to the life she wanted. The trial in 1995 drew intense media coverage. Prosecutors presented Susan's confession and evidence showing she had planned the act and then fabricated the carjacking story. Her defense team focused on her mental health and emotional state, arguing that she was deeply depressed and not thinking clearly at the time. They tried to convince the jury to spare her from execution. After deliberation, the jury found her guilty of the unalivings. Susan was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Susan broke down in tears. She cried openly in court as the reality of spending decades behind bars set in. She was scheduled for parole in 2024, which was denied. Now, Susan Smith has no way of ever being released. Number 3. Leticia Stauch. Leticia Stauch became widely known after the disappearance of her 11-year-old stepson, Gannon Stauch, in 2020. Leticia reported him missing, telling authorities he had left home and never returned. Evidence soon pointed to something far more disturbing. Investigators discovered that Gannon had been unalived inside the home and that Leticia had spent days trying to hide what happened. Authorities tracked her movements across several states, uncovering surveillance footage and forensic evidence that contradicted her claims. Eventually, she was arrested and charged in connection with Gannon's passing after his remains were later found in another state. Leticia pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, claiming she was not mentally responsible. After deliberation, the jury rejected her insanity claim and found her guilty on all major charges. Number 2. Chandler Halderson. In July 2021, Chandler Halderson called 911, alleging that his parents, Bart and Krista, were missing. He claimed he had seen them just a day ago, traveling with an unknown couple, and that he had not heard from them since. Investigators could not find any trace of the couple and worried that something horrible had happened to them. Their worst fears came true when a torso, later identified as Bart's, was found in the woods with bullet holes in it. Just a day later, the police also found the remains of Krista. Chandler was an immediate suspect, and investigators believed that he had unalived his parents after they caught on to his many, many lies. Chandler had claimed that he was a student at a local technical school, had a job offer from SpaceX, and that he was making enough money to move away with his girlfriend. They later found out that Bart had called the technical school just a day before his disappearance and learned that Chandler had never enrolled there. Prosecution argued that Chandler panicked and decided to unalive his parents. His defense team claimed he was innocent and argued that all the evidence the prosecution was basing their case on was purely circumstantial. Sure, but the jury believed it was more than enough to convict Chandler for the unalivings, sentencing him to serve a lifetime in lockup. Number 1. Grant Amato. In 2019, Grant Amato, a registered nurse, shot and unalived his whole family, his parents and younger brother, at the family home in Florida. Why? Grant was obsessed with a Bulgarian camgirl named Sylvie and had spent over $200,000 to facilitate his obsession. His family had tried seeking help for him, even sent him to rehab, but nothing worked. It is believed that after returning from rehab, and having all of his devices taken away from him, effectively keeping her away from Sylvie, Grant decided to unalive his family and pin the crime on his brother. His goal was to cash in on their life insurance policies and then use that money to start a life with Sylvie in Bulgaria. The case drew widespread attention for several reasons, mostly because Grant came from an incredibly loving and supportive household and had once shared a close relationship with his brother, Cody. Grant had lied to his parents about starting a career as a streamer, making them buy him expensive equipment to facilitate this career, when he really used that money to talk to Sylvie. He had told her that he was a very successful gamer in the United States and sent her all sorts of gifts to win her affection. When his family found out, they gave him an ultimatum: either turn your life back around or leave the home. Prosecution alleged that after being caught talking to Sylvie once again, Bart told him to move out the next day. That next day, Grant shot his mother while she was using the family computer, shot his father when he came home, and then called Cody before shooting him in the doorway. The police were able to track Grant to a hotel less than 24 hours after the unalivings, and he claimed he was innocent despite the evidence against him. The prosecution did not have to work hard. In fact, Grant was sentenced to life in prison just a month after his trial began. When asked if he felt remorse, Grant responded with, "My family has been blaming me for months for ruining their lives, stealing, and not following the rules of the home, so I might as well be blamed for this too." Interestingly, Grant started a relationship with Victoria Goodwin, the ex-wife of Ghost Adventures host Aaron Goodwin, and even facilitated hiring a hitman to unalive Aaron so they could be together. The plan was stopped in its tracks, and Victoria was arrested.